Brandon Willis today. Brandon was the editor-in-chief of last year's Evangel yearbook. So Brandon, you want to tell us a little bit about your vision for the yearbook last year?
Yeah. Thanks for having me on the show, by the way. And so last year's yearbook, it was called Alpha, and that really symbolized Alpha as a new beginnings, like, Alpha in the alphabet. And then it also symbolized Evangel's dominance in what it does. So we really wanted to focus on the academic programs and how we were doing great in our field. And so it was really just focusing on a new Evangel for this year.
So what kind of stories did you do in talking about that kind of thing?
So we covered everything from like the criminal justice, their shooting competition that they have for their criminal justice majors, and faculty who travel overseas and do philanthropic work, to AB events, to interviews with campus celebrities, so to speak, like Todd Lanning, Hollywood, and Dr. Taylor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. So tell me kind of whose responsibility it was to do each one of these interviews. How did you as a leader kind of choose people to do these things?
In the end, like, everything rested on my shoulders, but we had a great team of editors, assistant editors and contributors, and so mostly it was Jen Walk and Emily Ellsworth who were writing most of the stories. I did a few ones of people that I knew because I really understood their story. And then we had a great team of photographers from both our workshop class and from student media who covered pretty much every single thing that happened on campus. And we weren't able to fit every single event in the book, but we definitely got the best aspects of it.
So from you as, obviously overseeing everything, what was your favorite story that you got to do or you got to read that somebody else did?
Well, this might be a little biased, but my favorite story was actually one I wrote about Hollywood, and it really tells sort of his story of how he got here because, he's a groundskeeper, and, we all see him around. He's at every sporting event, he's at every score, but it tells how he got here. Like, he came here basically when Scott Hall was built, and he's been hanging out with the guys from Scott Hall ever since, and loves Evangel athletics probably more than some of the athletes do.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was a really interesting story to tell. I'm glad it's part of Evangel's history.
Yeah, so you kind of get to know people through the yearbook that maybe you never you see around, but you don't necessarily know their story.
Yeah, it tells their
cool.
deeper story. Yeah, you're right.
That's awesome. Well, tell me, what kind of what were some of the challenges as an editor-in-chief that you had to overcome in order to get this all done and ready to get out to everybody?
Yeah. Well, the hardest are always the deadlines because, they happen periodically through the semester, and then of course you have your huge end of the year deadline. And so you're always pushed at the beginning of the year. Not a lot of events are happening, so you have to cover like departmental stuff. But then towards like the end of the first semester, you have all the big fall events happening. So you're like inundated with all these huge stories and page deadlines that you have to do. So it's a weird ebb and flow of things happening. And so, sometimes it's not stressful, but you need to be working really hard. And then other times it's really stressful, and it's just like, I have so much to do. I already know I'm working really hard. I can't work any harder. So
keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, so you said that you have to do like some of the fall events. You cover those kind of things. How do you go about organizing that and getting someone to take pictures and write the stories and that kind of thing?
So for like really big events, like homecoming, for example, it's probably our biggest event of the year. We have like a special meeting, and we basically, carve apart the whole series of events, and we have a person covering every single one. Smaller events, quote unquote smaller events like Harvest Fest or Spring Fling, we usually just assign a group of photographers and writers to cover that. And then other periodic events, we usually just send like a duo, like one photographer, one writer, and they collude together to create a great story.
Yeah, well, there's definitely a lot of teamwork involved.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so you obviously are good with working with people
I hope.
have to do all that.
I hope, yeah.
So what kind of, I don't want to bring up any hard feelings, but I mean, what kind of challenges do you think you've learned to overcome as a chief editor?
Yeah, and so I think the biggest thing is learning to double check people's work. Of course you have to trust people, but making sure that you are keeping people accountable, and that can be hard, especially when you're working with your peers. But yeah, that's probably the best thing I've learned from both like an editor standpoint, and also just a life lesson for when I'm working, is that you need to trust people, but also you don't be afraid to confront someone.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, it was great to meet with you.
Yeah,
Great
thanks.
to see you.